So let me get this straight. Qualifying will now be on Friday. So they're probably doing practice sessions today, with today being Thursday. So they're probably doing practice sessions today. What is going on, guys? It is JJ here, back with a new video, and this is going to be a very, very interesting one because we are taking a look for the first time at the F1 sprint races. And we could keep this intro very short and sweet, but we're gonna continue on because I have no clue what an F1 sprint race is. I did not realize that there were like many other races and like competition, like a smaller version of the big Grand Prix. And I guess they're called sprint races. And B, I think the team points still count on them. Because otherwise, why would teams commit themselves to them? I don't know. I don't need, the fact that it's happening at Imola as well, I think is so sick. And I'm actually really, really excited about it. So we're going to figure out what an F1 sprint race is. Maybe we'll watch like an F1 sprint race before getting into the real one this weekend. Let me know what we should take a look at, whether it's like the sprint race qualifying or like an actual race. We can watch an actual race on stream if we really wanted to. So we're going to learn about this. Hopefully it gives me a more in-depth detail. And yeah, obviously go check out the original video down in the description below. But yeah, let's get into it. As well, guys, you can find the original video down in the description below. Oh, sorry, 1 second, and blam.
Formula One teams have offered their broad support for the introduction of a sprint race experiment this year, which could be rolled out at 3 Grand Prix during the 2021 season.
And now,
after running effectively,
and now the 2022 season, so it must have worked out last year. Because now they're in, now they're dialed in.
The same weekend format since knockout qualifying was introduced in 2006, with the exception of elimination qualifying's 2-race stint in 2016 and the 2-day weekend at Imola last year. F1 is finally on the cusp of a major change in approach. The idea is to overhaul the traditional weekend format, practice on Friday, qualifying on Saturday, and the race on Sunday. It's been that way for years. Under this plan, qualifying will be shifted to Friday. That will then decide the grid for a sprint race on Saturday. This sprint race will then decide the starting order for the main Grand Prix on Sunday. For those who don't know, a sprint race is basically the same as a normal F1 race, but condensed, with a shorter distance of 100 kilometers and will take a maximum of 1 hour to complete. F1's planned trial of sprint races is likely to be at the Canadian, Italian and Brazilian Grand Prix this year.
So let me get this straight. Qualifying will now be on Friday, so they're probably doing practice sessions today, with today being Thursday. So they're probably doing practice sessions today, qualifying tomorrow, sprint race Saturday, big Grand Prix on Sunday. That's a lot of driving. That's a lot of driving, I feel like. And so the sprint races, I guess, then would not count towards the team totals or drivers championship, because there's no way. Like, imagine you win the sprint race but like lose the Grand Prix and still get the same amount of points that you would like if you just won a single Grand Prix. Like, that'd be really messed up. Hopefully he goes in depth on that. Maybe my brain's just thinking too hard.
Still to be finalised. Formula One has never officially run a sprint race before. There has been talk of changing the format for a long time. Teams have held back the introduction of other concepts, such as a reverse grid, where the fastest drivers from qualifying would start at the back of the field. However, in Formula 2, the sprint race has long been held on Sunday mornings, and at 120 kilometres long, is 50 kilometres shorter than the main event feature race on Saturdays. From 2021, there will be 2 sprint races per weekend in Formula 2 and Formula 3, taking place on Saturdays. The tightrope between entertainment and gimmicks was one F1 always has to tread carefully, but new CEO Stefano Domenicali quickly made his feelings clear, saying earlier this month that any plans for a reverse grid were over, but the sprint races were on the table for 2021. A recent F1 Commission meeting saw teams discuss the plans, and unlike the reverse grid proposal, everybody was on board. A new working group is being formed as we speak, and will aim to get a full plan in place soon, so the final decision can be made before the new season begins. Whilst initial approval from all of the teams is a massive step forward for F1, there are some big questions that still need to be answered.
Yeah, I want to know how this works.
One of those is what status the sprint race winner would hold in the record books. Would they have the official pole position for the Grand Prix, or would that still be reserved for the fastest driver in qualifying? And could we call the sprint race victor an official race winner? It's a technicality that F1 will need to clarify, and not just for the sake of the record books.
Yeah, that's
around the number of races completed.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's what I'm questioning. Like, how would that work logistically? Like, so you could win the sprint race, but not win the Grand Prix, and would you still get like points? Would you still be like a race winner? Would it still be like something to like be happy about? Because otherwise, just the major players are gonna bullshit the sprint race and then go hard in the Grand Prix. Like there's, if you don't give them something to want to win for the sprint race, then why try?
As well as dealing in official results and wins.
Yeah.
There must be a clear definition from a legal standpoint what constitutes a race. There will also need to be clarity on how the addition of sprint races impacts aspects such as tyre usage and part life.
Yeah, there's so much involved into this.
Given the teams will save sets with just one practice session instead of 3. On the parts front, teams have strict limits on how many power unit components they can use each season. The sprint races would undoubtedly add to the stresses placed on these parts, and of course, any spares from extra damage that might come from more wheel-to-wheel action. There will also be questions over matters such as grid penalties, and whether or not they could be served in a sprint race instead of a Grand Prix. The points and prize money system also needs to be clarified. The awarding of points would add some extra spice to the sprint races,
which I mean, obviously you guys in the guys, I'm going to be very, very active in the comments after this video. I need to know things. And maybe watching a sprint race too. Leave me your favorite like sprint race recommendations from last year. So from the 2021 season, like a good example of a sprint race, like what it did for this, for the teams, what it meant for the season, like the ramifications of it. Because I want to see those.
Given the distance is set to be 1/3 of a regular Grand Prix, awarding points at a similar weighting would seem logical. This still needs to be determined, and may be controversial to some fans. Another big question surrounds race selection. Monza was an obvious pick, given its high-speed nature and chances to overtake, with last year's incredible race won by Pierre Gasly being the trigger for fresh talks over new format changes. Interlagos and Montreal are both logical picks. Again, their layouts encourage overtaking, but there will inevitably be questions over their viability this year, given that neither race happened in 2020. It does show the confidence that F1 has in this year's current schedule, but should any of the 3 races be dropped, would another pick up the mantle and hold a sprint race instead?
AKA
sprint races may still concern some hardcore purist fans, but it is a gentle step that shouldn't undermine F1's DNA. The quickest drivers and teams won't face any penalty for succeeding, which was what many feared with reverse grids. One valid concern would be what the presence of another race in the weekend format does for the main Grand Prix itself, and whether it would take any sheen off the Sunday event. But the annual Macau Grand Prix, a Formula 3 event, has run a sprint race format with its own qualification race on Saturdays, and it only serves to add to the entertainment and variety of the weekend.
I love that.
The beauty of the sprint race experiment for F1 this year is that it could be rolled back quite easily if needed. If it turns out that sprint races were actually quite a bad idea, the fact they were only run at a handful of events makes it easy to remove. And the opposite is also true. If they prove to be a roaring success, then it can be expanded very easily. With the teams provisionally on board for a trial of sprint races in F1 this year, the biggest hurdle has already been overcome. F1's new working group will iron out the details in the coming weeks, but once clarity arrives, it should give another reason to get excited for the 2021 season.
Let's go!
And has to be considered an impressive early success in Stefano Domenicali's leadership of Formula 1. What do you think of the idea of sprint races in F1?
Honestly, answer his question. What do you think about sprint races in F1? Do you guys actually enjoy them? Mainly, what's going on? Which I still think questions need to be answered from my part, but obviously that is what I got you guys here for. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. This is going to be a very, very fun couple of days, sort of learning what the sprint races are like, how they move, and sort of the weekend schedule in general. Because I feel like there's a lot. We had a lot on our plate this weekend, and it's going to be fun. So let me know if there are any changes to sprint races in 2022, what those mean. Maybe WTF1 might be a go-to for this. So maybe we'll do an early video for WTF1 tomorrow. And then I think qualifying for the sprint race is also tomorrow. So you'll see that as well. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.